based on in August. They still did not have the immunization schedule, so they came up with what they thought it was going to be or close, and just wasn't quite enough.
And then I have a question on the other one too. How much of that money was grant money?
Every bit of it.
Oh, okay. And who's the grant from?
We've had several.
Oh, okay.
The biggest one has been Walmart through their neighborhood grant program. They've been
Yeah. There's been a few small donations from citizens.
The bulk of it has been from the different Walmarts in the area through their neighborhood grant program.
I will make a motion to approve the 2021 budget.
I'd like to discuss it first.
You'll have to second it.
Get on.
All right. What would you like to discuss?
Before you get into your discussions, like I noticed your notes from last meeting said that I wasn't here, obviously, and if you want to discuss the fire budget, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that have come up from the board or the public, or make any statements if you so desire. But the fire budget is advertised for 2021 is $1,550,000, which is the exact same as the 2020 budget. And if you recall, last year is the exact same as the 2019 budget. So this will be the third year in a row operating off of the exact same total dollar amount. So, very little has been changed or adjusted. A couple of line items were adjusted based on trending over this year, but the bottom dollar is the exact same for the third year in a row. With that, I would.
On the fire side, because the overall budget is $20,000 behind last year.
Yeah, it just, I wasn't here at the last meeting, unfortunately. I was had to be in another meeting with my full-time employer, and but I just want to make that statement. This is going to be the third year in a row that it's an identical budget presented, and certainly open for questions.
My first question is the pay of the township board and the clerk and the trustee. And they are an increase. And in my opinion, with social things going on, the economy the way it is, the wages the way they are, perhaps we ought to just leave those wages at the same we had last year.
Also, if you'll notice on the salary resolution, there's a separate part of the budget. We did leave the fire chief, the deputy chiefs the same. We did not increase our salaries for next year. The only salaries that are proposed increase is a 25-cent across the board for firefighters, and under the longevity, the full-time longevity. Last year, the max was 4 years. This year, our senior employee is 5 years. So we bumped that to 5 years because that ties into the pension salary that we report. But the firefighters are the only ones that are proposed for a raise for next year.
Let me ask you a question regarding that. I thought I saw that you had a $4,000 increase for payroll. Is that 4,000 enough to cover these raises?
If you look at it on the surface, no. My belief is that by looking at this year's payroll, we will still be okay next year because due to COVID, we had a lot of paramedic overtime this year, that we hope to not have next year. And that would cover, when we look at last year, the gap we had, the cushion we had, if you will, would more than suffice, that increase.
And we just wanted to make sure that we're covered there. Another question I had was on professional services. We have $18,000 budget in professional services. I don't know any major things that we've got, projects we got going on this year. Does anybody that we necessarily need $18,000 in legal services?
Yes.
Have you made your announcement yet? Clerk?
No, I have not.
Public knowledge yet? That probably now's a good time.
Yeah, now's a good time. Just let you know that Kelly actually resigned, Kelly O'Collar resigned as of October 31st. I've got an interim right now that's gonna be filling in. Denise McClure's in the back corner until she, decides whether she's crazy enough to keep the position, but at least she's gonna help us out in the meantime. But yeah, with Kelly stepping down, we'll definitely have some training opportunities that's gonna fall into that gap, that will fall into that category as well.
In professional services?
Yeah.
Okay. What kind of amount do you kind of foresee for that?
Without actually knowing, going into this, I won't actually have a meeting with them until Monday night, the three of them, or the two of them, the three of us together. So I don't know the actual overall yet. I'm hoping not really that much, without knowing exactly what we're going to have to do, and the time that we're going to have with the county, who are going to help us out.
Another just point of order would be to think back a few years ago when professional services was in the $50,000 range with the previous administration and clerk and how they were operating things, by bringing in educated accounting people that, something was now done that brought the professional services fees from prior administration from roughly $50,000 down.
And they overspent that more than once.
Yeah. But the 18 is not an exorbitant amount of money. I mean, we consider that collectively we're a $2 million township. And the other thing would be the fence issue that you're dealing with now. I mean,
Yeah, that's gonna tie up, that's tying some money. Just an example, I've got a fence dispute, it's actually tying up lawyers' time, and it's gonna cost the township money over a fence dispute.
We also spent around $11,000 on the fire territory, so that takes a big chunk of that. So if we take that top fire territory out of there, then I mean, 10 grand is, I would think, sufficient, but I don't, it's not sitting in your shoes, obviously, knowing everything that's going on, but.
Well, we certainly have no intention in, the future of bringing the territory back. That money that was spent on that, even though it didn't go through, from my standpoint, was, money well spent because we were projected to be the host unit, and we wanted to make sure that what we were putting together presented was factual and legal. We brought our professionals to the table. Harrison chose not to. They were obviously given that opportunity, but just the way they operated, they did not have an accountant on staff or that worked for them at the time, and at the time they did not have an attorney that worked for them. So.
And that's fine, but what I'm concerned with though is, we're obviously not gonna be pursuing that again, obviously, and that took up a big chunk of it. So if we're not pursuing anything like that this year, then perhaps some professional services need to be cut a little bit more.
But with us losing Kelly, I can see where they're coming from, that wouldn't be a wise choice to do that. I would leave it.
I don't think we'll be spending $11,000 for Kelly to replace her and train her to leave. So if we are, we're.
I noticed on some of the legal fees when I asked for a couple of the invoices, some of that stuff is clearly for EMS or the fire department, but yet the general fund is getting all those costs to the professional fees of the general fund, why is that not split up, according to whatever is being charged to the correct fund? Like, I saw that there was a report that was done for, I think it was for EMS, and it's like, why is the professional charges on that showing up in the, general fund and not in the fire department fund?
Good question, because it would all come out of that.
It has always come out of general, township general, and, you know, the other township that I work for are much larger. Everything comes, all professional services come out of township general. So,
Overall, that's the government.
I don't know for a fact, but I would say that that's a state board of accounts issue. Certainly that's, in the 15+ years I've been involved, they've always come out of township. And again, you know, at Wayne Township, they all come out of township.
The only question I have about any of this is our quartermaster. I had brought it up last year about there being an incentive for that, and the EMS director gets that $1 per hour. What do we have to do to make that happen so that it's, because that's such a huge responsibility. And
It is a good responsibility. One of the viewpoints that I look at is as a lieutenant, the quartermaster is currently a lieutenant, and by putting an additional stipend on that, he'd be making essentially more than his boss, which is the house captain, station captain, because we don't have the captain and lieutenants spread very much.
okay.
Ultimately, I would like to get that gap wider, and that was my hopes for this year until we didn't have the money. And when we look around, there's a lot of townships and fire departments and towns and cities that are holding flat for next year. Our financial advisors are hopeful that the townships won't be hit as hard as cities and towns. So we're hoping that we're gonna be okay. We're confident at this point that we're gonna be okay because of where our revenue sources and streams come from, are not as much impacted as cities and towns that rely on sales tax and, you know, riverboat taxes that were shut down for several months. So property taxes and payroll taxes look like they're gonna hold pretty steady for us,
Okay.
which is the bulk of our revenue sources. So there's, you know, just for a brief discussion, when I did the meet and confer with the union, which is required by law, as we developed the budget, a lot of their discussion points, I'm not opposed to any of the things that they would like to see and add to bring to the board for consideration, but as we did rough math that night, it came to about $77,000 to do it all. And, you know, we had sat and looked and said, you know, okay, well, if we're gonna add to the, you know, to this line item, tell me where we're gonna take away from. And we were all stumped.
Okay.
You know, we're all of the belief that our operating supplies, our EMS supplies, the way we do maintenance to the trucks, and the way we do maintenance to the building is purely as efficient as we can operate. And you know, if there's still one sitting in the room, they'll tell you how many times they get told no versus, you know, yes, when it comes to wants and needs. So we were all sitting around the table for a couple of hours and really stumped on where we could make cuts to add to the salaries and benefits line item. And without an overall increase in the budget, we couldn't come up with that. So that's something, as we continue to move forward, if our revenue sources are better than projected, and our EMS revenue continues to vastly improve, we can always sit down again, you know, with those numbers, and make changes at any point in time of the year to add to salaries and benefits if our revenue sources are there. We just we'll be very conservative at this point because, again, this is the third year with the same budget.
Okay.
as far as EMS revenue, we, are, where's Tim at? 120 right now. We're about 120 runs up from this time last year. And as of the 1st of October, our EMS revenue has equaled the entire year of 2019. So we still have a quarter to go. We do our budget planning with a projection of $120,000 of EMS revenue, and we hit that in October. So everything else that we collect the rest of the year is above and beyond what our expectations were when we made this budget planning a year ago.
Two things. Number one, because I'm new here, contractual payments for 14,000 under fire, what would that be construed as?
The biggest is gonna be on, like, monitors, the maintenance,
Okay.
the contracts on those.
Makes perfect sense.
Things like that. Our SCBA fill station that gets tested once a month to make sure the air quality is where it needs to be. We have it on a monthly, service plan, things like that. It's mainly a contract for maintenance.
And then just one other question, I don't know, if one of you guys, let's hypothetically say that we decided, well, let's lower the legal services budget. What is a procedure if you run over? What's a procedure to request additional funds to cover what you need?
We pretty much take it from another line item, cause this,
Okay,
we're really gonna go by the total budget that's right here.
got it.
And then what we move around within that, we can, but we just can't move it to different lines. We can't take fire money and put it over to township money, that kind of thing. But
Okay.
the line item isn't as necessary, but yeah, we can move that around. We just have to take it from somewhere else.
Got it. Thank you.
Township assistance. I have a question in regards to utilities. The utilities don't seem to, let me ask you this, how are we dividing out the utilities among different departments? Is it
That's
by
split out.
footage, or how's it done?
I'd have to look at the formula on that sheet. There's some formula that's used for that. I don't remember what it is.
It's a percentage that they use across the board
Yeah.
on how we receive taxes. Just for discussion's sake, 66% of our tax rate goes to fire, then 25% goes to township, and, the remainder goes to assistance. That's the same calculation that they use paying utility bills.
I was just wondering, because a lot of businesses go by square footage, what you occupy, and 4,300 seemed kind of high for a little office, so.
Yeah, that was a state board of accounts issue several years ago, that they could, it used to be the township and fire split it, and then the state board of accounts came in and an audit and said we had to take some out of.
Yeah, that's a split. I knew there was a formula that they wanted. I just can't remember what it was.
And I'm assuming, I hope I'm not assuming incorrectly, is what happened. With Kelly's resignation, Ms. McClure would take over the analyst as well.
What's that?
That she would take over-
Investigator?
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Just to be
Or
clear.
at this time, right now, yeah. Because like I said, she hasn't committed yet. She wants to kind of get to know more about it with her job schedule. I definitely respect that. We all know how that could be. By the way, can we make these meetings a little later?
Yes.
Well, speaking of the job schedule, what is the arrangement gonna be?
No, we're gonna talk about that later. This literally just got through on us, Friday, so we're
Oh.
gonna work through all that now. Or like I said, Monday when we get together.
Okay. I've got a couple statements. Okay, one thing I noticed is we still have the highest per capita expenditures in Morgan County of all the townships in this county. And this seems to happen year after year after year, so we are quite a bit higher. And the tax rate of the fire debt and the CUME fund from 2019 to 2020 went up by 140%. It's more than doubled. So that hurt a lot of people, and not only that, I mean, our taxes went up pretty high on the township. But the people who own rentals, they get hurt even worse because they have to pay 3 times the amount. And then now they can't even, kick people out or whatever. They can stay in without paying the rent. And so that's really been a hardship on some of the people that have rentals. And one thing I wanted to say too about the professional fees, I have looked at, the 10 townships that have higher populations than ours, just above ours. And we spend, for instance, in 2018, we spent $18,682. The next closest one to us is $7,000, less than half of the professional fees. We are way over on professional fees.
That's because people remonstrate everything.
No, it's not just because of that.
Oh, that's a big portion of it. If you look back on the legal fees from all of that, having to have the accountant, having to have the
I don't
attorney.
even know if there was an demonstrate in 2018. I think there was in 19.
Either way, when things are constantly brought to the attorneys, those services aren't free. I work my full-time job. I work for a law firm in Indy. It's not cheap. Legal fees are not cheap. So when there are issues that are put out there, they have to be paid. It is what it is.
No, I understand that, but what I'm saying is all these other townships, they don't have anywhere near what we're paying.
But that's what I'm saying.
What
Do
we're
they have
paying out.
people that fight them at every turn? That's the difference.
They're not spending that kind of money.
Then they must not have a public that's fighting things. There's no way of being able, you're comparing apples to oranges. There's no way of knowing.
I don't think there was any.
Ma'am, was the last meeting for public comment?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just curious. Thank you.
But I'm just stating, you're comparing apples to oranges. What happens in one township is never going to be exactly identical in another township.
Oh, I agree there. But this is 10, these are 10 different ones with higher populations than ours, is what I'm saying. And they're not even close to ours, not even close.
Let me address,
Again, apples to oranges.
let me address Mr. Russell's question. In the minutes from the last meeting, it said the public felt they needed more time to review, ask questions, give their input. Kelly Acada stated she was still working on line items up to the end. The board agreed to allow the public to give input at the next meeting, which is this meeting. The proposed budget comments were then closed.
But
Okay,
this
that'd be input on the
isn't a
budget.
budget.
Right.
This isn't for this specific item, so.
Speaking for Brenda and I, our taxes went down for some reason. And we have 2.5 acres. And, our taxes are less than $100 a month. You can't go anywhere cheaper than that.
So I will, say, all in favor to pass the motion, say aye. For passing the 2021 budget. Aye.
Before you take a vote, you need to do each fund separate.
Each
technically.
one?
Yeah. You can
Okay.
take a vote on the fire, the township, and just that separate.
Then I will,
Your motion was put in, yeah, the signature gotta be separate.
okay, that's fine. So all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Yep.
I think we're at $20,000 less than last year. So much of it had approved. Vote in favor.
It's this one to sign, right? Or do this one second, take the resolution.
Your resolution is separate.
I will also make a motion to approve the salary resolution for 2021. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All
based on the salary resolutions approved, I will need to run the numbers to figure out what the certified salary needs to be. So at some point in time between now and the end of the year, we will need to do a meeting regardless of
Okay.
anything else other than that certified first salary. I'll have to check with Kelly also. I don't know if they've given us the 2021 rates yet. They haven't changed them in the last few years, but I don't think they've given us what that rate is.
Okay.
The last time they changed it, it actually went down, so when we have that, we'll need to have a meeting to approve the certified, salary letter.
Mike, can I ask you a question? Is there enough, excuse me, money in the budget to handle the payrolls through the rest of this year without
Yes.
doing additional?
Right now, we
Okay.
are right on track. We don't have any wiggle room, we don't have any extra, but we are right on track to hit the.
Because there's 3 payrolls in December, so, okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be tight. If we look at our total budget, on top of the monthly reports that she does for the board, she runs me a report after every payroll, and I have it split out.
Well, we were.
It's very tight, but right now, our overtime costs are going down because of medical.
Well, that was
Less,
a question he had, but he didn't mention it tonight, but.
It's very tight, but right now, yes, I think we'll be able to make that.
We need new firefighters recently?
Well, we've had one, what's that, end of August? Short pass. We've had one that came in the end of August, and we had one that resigned, Labor Day weekend, day after Labor Day. It was Labor Day, wasn't it? Actually, on Labor Day. So we're in the process of filling that spot now.
Still part-time?
No, one was part-time, came to full-time, and then the other one just recently became part-time, and was just offered. We also hired several additional part-time firefighters. We're kind of in the middle of that right now. Pretty good cleanup of our roster, and it'll be,
Let's just say that 3/4 of your firefighters, you have to fill your equipment.
we have a roster of 50 that we're authorized, to carry. And if we were to get hit, then that's the best we do. We do. Yeah, we provide the best we can. We've been lucky, for the most part this year. We have had, one that was positive for COVID, actually 2 positives. And then we've had several others that were sick and quarantined throughout the pandemic. One of which, which all of them tested negative. The biggest issue that we had was one of our paramedics that worked a dedicated shift, was part-time for us, but he was full-time for Brownsburg. And during the pandemic, Brownsburg eliminated their employees' ability to work part-time jobs and be exposed to the virus. So that created a lot of overtime for about 6 weeks. All of our paramedics were part-time, but we were, knock on wood, able to get her in covered without lapsing coverage. So. Margo back there?
Yep,
Yeah.
I'm here.
Margo worked here for about 6 weeks straight, with about a 24-hour break every 3 or 4 days, to keep us covered and in service. So you'll probably notice at the end of the year, she's going to be the highest paid Madison Township employee we've ever had. She already is, but yeah, by the time the end of the year gets here, definitely has cover that gap.
And we're still waiting on the county to see if we're gonna be able to get any of that back, right?
We are working
We're working.
several different angles on reimbursements,
That's
from the
right.
county, from FEMA. We've gotten some money from the CARES Act. We're preparing now, for the third round of reimbursements from the CARES Act, through Health and Human Services, federal government money. But yeah, the county has got a bunch of money that they say they're not gonna be able to spend all of, so we're gonna try to help them.
I need to make any calls. Be happy to try it.
Yeah,
Bug 'em.
they've been friendly at this point, so.
I will make a motion to adjourn at 6:16.
Thanks very much.
Oh, all in favor?